especially because I didn't know the history of yourself and Joan as far as her coming, being your co-op back in the very beginning, and your relationship with her. So I'd hoped to be able to have that interaction, that conversation about that.
Yeah, I had thought about her, forgot about her being a co-op.
Yeah. But you mentioned at one of our gatherings that you mentioned that she had been a co-op on the, actually she started, but she mentioned herself that she co-op first with you.
Right, right.
And that was her beginning, and so that was the interesting piece. But this all came, we started this, and this came about because of my effort, or our efforts, to just recognize Mary Jackson during our Black History Month celebration. In the course of recognizing her and her being a member of our church, I thought it just would be interesting to have a few people, the personal connection. And we had some people within the church, myself, Brother Marshall Rouse, and a myriad of other people who had actually served. Al Smith had served with her. And so we thought it would be interesting just to have some real voices, real people who had opportunity to experience her when she was taking kids into her house, when she was mentoring children, when she was tutoring. And so out of that came my feelings. And when you mentioned Al Smith, we had a Tuesday, and we still have a Tuesday men's get-together, where retired guys get together and eat lunch and talk about things. One of those meetings was when Al Smith shared his experience at NASA, where and part of his career, part of his time there, he had seen the signs that said white and colored bathrooms and water fountains. And I said, man, you mean at NASA, at Langley? Yes, they were still there during his career. And I thought that was really interesting to share that piece. And so out of that came, again, the need to, or the desire to hear some voices of some of the people who had experienced the early being black at NASA back in the day. And so that's when Sam Scott came and talked about his experiences. And that was interesting to have that, because just a couple of weeks after Sam shared with us, he went on to be with the Lord. He was gone. And so it's just a blessing to be able to have that documented, to have his voice to talk about his experience. And so out of that, Mike Chapman and some other folks thought it would be interesting to have some of the other people who had come through that era, who had been one of the pioneers. We recognize Mary Jackson and some of the other folks, and Christine Darden, of course, she was there too. We talked with her. But we just wanted to take the opportunity just to document some of those stories. And so you, Gil, are one of those people who have had that experience, that journey through the ranks of NASA as a black man, as a black leader. And so we just felt it would be only right to hear about you, to hear about your experience. And so I'm just going to open the conversation just to allow you to talk about whatever part of it you like, from the beginning to the end, wherever you'd like to speak. We would just really like to just hear that.
Okay. I'll tell you what I can remember. My name is Gilbert Haynes, and I was an employee at NASA for 32 years. When I was finishing up college, I was a veteran, and I had gone through 4 years at Virginia State, 3.5 years, something like that. And I was home for Christmas in 1961. And in Norfolk, there was a bowling alley for blacks, for African Americans. And I went there to bowl during that time, and I ran into a high school classmate of mine, Titus Harrison, who was also among the early black engineers at Langley. And I asked him what he was doing. I had heard, during my years away from Norfolk, that he was at Howard, he started out in Norfolk State and went to Howard, and he finished Howard as an electrical engineer and managed to get a job at Langley. So I ran into him and asked him what he was doing, and he told me. And I was thoroughly impressed with what he said about his job. And I asked him, I said, do you think I could get a job over there? He said, no, you can't get a job over there. You got to have your stuff. That's, you know what it means. But see, he didn't know that that I had been going to school for the last 3 years. And so I didn't say anything to him. I just, on that Monday, it was a weekend, that Monday, I grabbed my brother's car and drove over to NASA and found the HR guy, don't remember his name now, and talked to him. And so he asked me to send him a resume, and I think he took an application right on the spot. And I put together the resume and sent it to him. This was in the last week of December 1961. And so he took all that stuff for secret clearance and all that, you know. So because he had to do his investigations. So I sent him what he asked me to send him, and then I went on back to school to finish out the semester because I had found before I left for Christmas, and this was the first semester of my 4th year. I found out that I had completed all of my requirements for the degree, and that meant that after I finished that semester at the end of January, I was done. So I went and did that, and then I came home, and in January, late January, maybe it was early February of '62, I got this letter from NASA, and basically they said, you're hired, and you are to report for duty on February 20th, I think it was, in 1962. Man, I jumped up. We were staying with my mother at the time. I jumped up. I almost hit that 9-foot ceiling, man. Happiness. And so I went out and bought myself a green suit, borrowed some money from somebody, and showed up on February 20th. So happens that was the day that John Glenn made his first flight. I think it was the 20th, I think. And I mentioned that because it impressed me, and now because I knew that Catherine had done so much work to get that to happen. And so I spent that day, my first day at NASA, in a conference room listening to a loudspeaker that was giving the play-by-play for John Glenn's flight. And once the guy took me in and shook my hand, he shuttled me to this conference room. That was my first day of interview and being assigned to my duty station. So from there, the next day I went and completed being introduced to all of the members in my section. Back then they had branches, and the branches had multiple sections. And my branch head was Cliff Nelson. My section head was Sheldon Peterson, and my supervisor was John Patterson. And it's funny that I remember that, but I do. And of course my degree was in physics, and most of those guys were engineers. And so they thought they would give me a physics-oriented task to begin with. And so they gave me the task of determining of being able to calculate the output of solar cells in space. Now that sounded pretty simple, but but the key to it was the spectrum of the sun outside the Earth's atmosphere is different than the spectrum of the sun when it hits the Earth because of the atmosphere. It absorbs all of the blue lights, to some degree. And so if you test a satellite and with that blue light missing, then the output's lower than if you were above all the atmosphere. So they gave me a spectral monochromator. I don't know if you remember what that was, but it was an instrument with prisms and mirrors in it, and it stood about that tall, and it was, something that my college professor used back in 1920 when he was in engineering school. But anyway, they gave me that, and they gave me a Marchand mechanical calculator. I remember that thing because it was noisy. They had been hiring lots of people, everybody that had scientific capability. They were bringing them in because they wanted to get the space thing going. And you would hit a couple of buttons on that thing, it would run off. And I was in an office with 7 people. So when I did these measurements with the monochromator and the solar cells, I had to go back to my desk and go through the calculations necessary to put all this data together. And I was in there just a cacking it. And when I started, everybody left the room for a smoke break, Excuse me. I get 20 fraud calls a day. But anyway, in this experiment, I used a tungsten light, which has almost no blue in it. And then I had another light that was like an ultraviolet light. I can't remember what that was. But anyway, their spectra were known. I mean, people had determined what their spectral response to various monochromatic lights were. So I took that information, and somebody, I guess an earlier satellite, had decided what the sun spectrum was. And so I don't know, I must have done 500 solar cells from different manufacturers, and determine their spectral response, how the solar cell spectrum respond, because it responds to blue light that you can't see, the ultraviolet and all that stuff, and it responds to the visible light that you can see, and it responds to infrared light, all the way through the spectrum. And so I started producing these, I thought, nice looking curves of the spectral response of solar cells. And then I merged them with the spectrum for the sun, and that would allow me to estimate what their outputs would be in the sun. That was my internship, and after a year, in February of '63, I presented that to my bosses, division chief all the way down, and I guess they accepted it enough because they didn't fire me, And some years later, I ran into Cliff Nelson, the branch head in the activities building. They were having some sort of affair over there, and he had been retired for some time, and he remembered who I was, and he said, "As I remember, we were concerned about you showing your true colors," And I was a section head then, But I guess in a sense I could have been upset about that, but I was happy because it meant that they decided that they would take a chance on me, And I wasn't of the impression that I was of so much that, you know, somebody would take a chance, you know, it's for such a high, you know, such a high organization. But anyway, I continued to work on solar cells. They had all kinds of silicon solar cells, cadmium sulfide solar cells. And then they started giving me other things to determine the performance of, not just in the sun, but as a standing power source, like thermoelectric generators and stuff like that. So I did that for 72, almost 10 years. And during that time, Dorothy Vaughan, who was in charge of the calculators, computers, I went to her and she taught me Fortran 2. They had Fortran 1 when they brought the computer in, but I guess this was 5 or so years later, less than 5 years, they got into Fortran 2. So she taught me Fortran 2. And before, you know, while I was taking that course, I didn't ask for permission from anybody to take it. I just went over there and asked her to teach me. And I said to my supervisor, John Patterson, I'd like to take, you know, the computer Fortran lessons. No, you don't need no Fortran lesson. Well, I was almost through the course then, you know, so I didn't say anything else to him. I just went ahead and completed the course and got the certificate, and that allowed me the opportunity to buy some things that I would not have thought to buy. And that was, they were coming up with what they call then the computerized or computer accessories, like digital printers and digital voltmeters, multimeters, or whatever you want to call them. The data was taken on printed cards, punched cards. So I set up every near the end of the fiscal year, they had money left over. So, and John Patterson would come to me and say, "You need anything, Gil?" I said, "Yeah." So I bought all this equipment. And so when I bought that equipment, about that time we had moved into 12 what was called a flight instrumentation division down, I can't remember the name of it, but you could walk under the building. It was open, you know. They gave me 2 rooms for lab in that building. And I set this stuff up, and I just went through everything that would generate power, taking data on it, and punched out a whole lot of stuff. And so there were then, I guess I had done enough for them in that area, so they wanted me to come and finish up the power system for satellite, because that was our function, to produce power systems for small satellites, like the micrometeoroid satellites and that kind of thing. And they had one that had been going for 3 or 4 years, and they wanted me to finish that up. But then they were going to start a new one. Well, at the time, I have to admit, it was unchristian of me. But I told them that I didn't want to finish up that one. I wanted to start this new one, you know. And part of that was, you know, because the white people, while they were cordial, and I really didn't have a whole lot of problem with them. Maybe because I was just on a learning curve and I didn't have time to think about that. But the guy that done this satellite that was being finished was, you know, I mean, he had some issues, but he you know, he had a good job, so he was basically a nice guy, the way he acted. I told him I didn't want to finish that behind him. I wanted to start a new one. And Spud Youngblood, I don't know if you remember him. He walked with one of his feet was clubbed, like, and he gave me the job. I said, "Dang." So he gave me the job, and he gave me a couple of guys to work with me, an engineer, and they assigned a technician, Ed McClellan, to me. And so we started off building this thing, and I don't know if you remember a guy named Merton Sussman. Yeah, you wouldn't. Merton was a character. I mean, he was a character. He was really an electronic genius, but he had no personality. None. I mean, none. And but I got along with him, because every day he came in my office and went through every little thing that he did to create this control circuit for this power system. Yeah, I appreciated it because I didn't know much about that, and you know. But then he wanted to go get his PhD, and we were in the middle of building this satellite. So they said that if they didn't let him go get his PhD, he wouldn't be much good because he'd be teed off, you know. So the next thing you know, I got to be responsible for all of this stuff, the whole satellite system. And I said, "But I don't know nothing about all this stuff." "Well, you gotta learn, you know." So we actually did it. We put together the power system, and it was for something called a dual air density satellite. It had two spheres, one 12-foot and one 30-inch, and we had to build power systems for both of them. And we did that. And what I got out of that was that when you looked at these finished products, they were pretty, because it was an aluminum shell with blue solar cells on it, and they were, you know, properly spaced around it so that you get same power at all times. And we took that thing down took it over to the West Coast, to Lompoc, California, which is where the Air Force Base is, and that's where they launched polar orbits that circled the North and South poles, rather than those that go around like the equator. And we got that thing tested and ready to go, and it took us till, I don't know, September to near Christmas to get the thing right. But excuse me, about a week before Christmas we launched, and we used a 4-stage Scout. And down around Antarctica, the 4-stage blew a hole in it. I don't know why, but into the ice it went, you know. And they had talked about building another one, but the money was tight. This was 75, and we didn't build it. But the other thing that happened was that when I got back, my boss, John Daniel, asked me to come to his office. And he said that Bill Mace, who was the division chief at the time, wanted me to take over the section. We had some Southern white boys in that section, and they were cordial, you know. But a couple of them had enough time to retire, and so I went ahead and took the section. My other option was to be a program manager for some of the other things going on in flight systems. And so I took the section, and we worked on various parts of the power supplies, like the batteries and control circuits. And I had done all the work on the solar cells, and we just kept up with the progress in them. And so after about 5 years, Jack Zanks retired from from the section in the hangar. So Bill Mace asked me to go over there and be the supervisor for that. There was another guy over there. He wound up being a branch head, Mitt Hilton, somebody, the guy before Jack Zanks. He and the guy, the main engineer, what was his name? Anyway, I know it, but I can't think of it right now. But they had a hard time getting along together, and so when I went over there, I had learned in the Air Force when I was made sergeant that the advice I got about being a supervisor of men, and this was the Air Force now, not Army, was to just take it easy. Just take it easy. So that's what I did when I was, assigned that section. And everybody had a job that knew what they were supposed to do, so I left them alone and let them do the job. And the whole time, nobody said, I ain't gonna do this. Dave Holmes is what I'm thinking about. He's quite a character, as you know. And so it was really an easy job, working with them, because we would all get together and say what everybody had to do and what part of the flight experiment they had to do, and everybody explained it, and it all seemed to go together. So that's what we did, and most of the time we were successful. Actually, you might say every time, because we never crashed. We did that for 14 years, and that was probably where that 14 years went, And during that 14 years, there were a lot of co-ops coming through the center, and I always had first dibs on all the African American co-ops. You want this guy? And that suggested to me that maybe somebody else didn't want him. But they were good engineers. The Joan, for example, when she was a co-op, she was a good co-op, and I was impressed with her work. And Carter, what was Carter's name? Real tall guy.
Daniel or?
Don.
Don.
Yeah. He was a co-op.
Yeah.
And what we found out about a lot of our co-ops, the African American co-ops, was that they would get kind of weak near the end of their coursework. They started out valedictorians, pseudo-doctorants, but when they got near the senior years, they kind of, where they had maybe a 3.5, they wound up 3.1, or in some cases below 3 GPA. And Don Carter was one of the few that kept his GPA up. He went to Tennessee Tech, and he was smart, but he got into something. I don't know what it was. I think I'm guessing it was dope. And I talked to him about going to the rehab. We had the counselors and everything for that, but I don't think he ever went. And about that time, that was about the time I retired. But he was a good engineer, and I understand he quit and went back home. He wouldn't take a bow or anything, just went back home. Anyway, but every time they offered me one, I'd take him.
Interesting thing about, I knew Don Carter when I was there. I knew him. He married, a young lady he married was also an engineer at Langley. And what I would remember from the relationship, it was something about that relationship that caused him to go left or right, a little bit. That drove him to where he changed.
Yeah, Angie.
Yeah, that drove him to change, and so that was a big break point for him. That relationship got rough,
Yeah.
and from that point on went the other way. Yeah, I remember him very well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't. I knew that they were having trouble, but and I knew that they broke up because.
Yeah.
But and I ran into her 2 years ago.
Okay.
2-3 years ago. She's
Okay.
up at. She went up to Goddard, but I think she was in headquarters.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And so, yeah, as you shared, Gil, as you in your beginning and toward the end of your career, you had a lot of opportunities to mentor and to have interaction with young blacks as they came into NASA. Let's go back to the beginning. As you came in, did you find any mentorship with a black? What was the relationship between a few blacks that were there, and as you came in?
The person who had the strong desire to mentor us was Murray Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
But Murray was on the aviation side of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so she befriended us, my wife and I. But, we were Baptists and you guys were here, so we kept going to the church that we had been going to when we were in Norfolk. So no, other than my boss, who was white, mentorship wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Did you see, one of the things I shared and some of us shared during my 30-some years, 38 years or so, there were many people that I passed and saw faces, but didn't really have any interaction with or didn't know. Actually, and that's a shame to say, some of those people the whole time I seen, waved to, and spoken to, but didn't know who they were or what they did. So that was one of the fallacies as we shared during our conversations, that we had those experiences there at Langley, and for some reason, we just didn't come together. I was amazed at one of Sam Scott's sharings. He said during the time he was there early on, there were a lot of things outside of the field that were going on as far as protests and struggles for rights, equal rights, and that kind of thing. And he said he had to be very careful of that, his associations and affiliations with that sort of thing, because as you mentioned earlier when you came in, security clearances were one of the things that were important. And he was fearful that if he had gotten too close to some of those things, he might have lost his clearance because of affiliations with organizations or folks who were trying to stand up for rights. And I'm wondering, in your experience, did you ever get a sense that any of your outside affiliations, or if you had stood up for some sort of discriminatory thing or some sort of thing that you felt wasn't right, that you would have been pushed down or suppressed because of that?
I never thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought of that. The thing I thought about with respect to to the activity that was going on with Martin Luther King and all the rest of them, that was going on when I was finishing up in college, and they had not completely gotten accepted at lunch counters, especially in Petersburg. And one of the guys, Wyatt T. Walker and Milton Reed, they were leading the activity there. And I went to maybe one or two of those rallies. But when I got to NASA, I wasn't active, and so I didn't think about that. But it might have been true,
Sure.
but I don't know.
Yeah, but a lot of people were oblivious of some of the things that were around, and I remember for sure, back in the day, there were a lot of jokesters. We had a lot of people who were jokesters, and I remember very vividly some of the jokes that guys would tell, and they'd have these 3 different races or 3 different sets of people, and Polacks and other people, this kind of thing, and we did, just joke and jest. We would just receive that and not think anything of it. Later on, as we got to be more sensitive as to the different cultures of people. That was sort of like pushed away, taboo. But as I look back on that, a lot of those times that maybe when people of color might have been in those circles of those jokes, that those Polacks or other folks might have been us, as those folks who were not really the ones who were doing whatever. And so learned that or accepted that later. If you had to look back over your career to look at a moment or a specific incident that you might reflect on to say, this is a time where, this particular situation or this instance, I dealt with it or went through it, and I was treated or had to go through these steps because of my color, because of my race. Would there be such a time that you might remember that you experienced?
No, really.
Okay. Okay.
I guess, the thing of it was, I knew that the people around me, a lot of them were not given to speak or to, have any social contact of any, and some of them got to the point where they would speak, what they would see in the grocery store downtown, they wouldn't say a word. And I knew that they were like that, but I have never felt like I should have a good social contact with somebody that I thought didn't want to have a social contact with me. But during the course of those years, I played golf with some of them. That was social, but it was because I had some of these people were nice. They were, and
same here. And so one other thing, if you had a message, because of during your career, you had opportunities to bring young African Americans into NASA, into research, into engineering, and to understand what goes on there. And so if you had a message for young people today who were looking for careers along that same line, would there be a word of encouragement or a word of caution, or what would you say to them?
No words of caution, just words of encouragement. And because engineering, as you know, is it can be an intense subject, and a lot of the kids don't like math. Now, one of the big things that created the African American culture at Langley was the National Technical Association. And just about every black engineer and some of the technicians belonged to that organization. And back in '78, I joined the National Technical Association because they had their conference at Langley, or in Hampton. And in '74, I told them no, I didn't want to join. But by '78, I decided to join. And the minute the conference was over, Jim Harris and Marsh, whoever was president at the time, grabbed me one-on-one, we got a job for you, And that job was to create a student symposium, because African Americans during that time would go to the state academies of science to present papers, but it was only like 1 or 2 kids out of the state, black kids, at their conferences. So we didn't have much of an opportunity to get together and expose our work. So they wanted me to put together a symposium for university and college students, especially the HBCU students, excuse me. So to do that, I went to the EEO officer, Andy something, well, he's a white guy, and told him what we wanted to do. And he took us all the way up the line, me mainly, and we got funded. We got funded $25,000, which back then was more than ample. And in the NTA, Murray Jackson, Catherine, Christine, and several other women, and just about all of the men, all of the NTAs. We got together and talked about what we would do. And Murray Jackson offered her daughter to work with us as an administrative assistant. We didn't call them that, didn't call them secretaries. But Carolyn, and we worked for 2 years, and Carolyn was there for every minute, you know, and she was just super. I mean, everything we asked her to do, she did it, and then she thought of some things to do on her own, and she did that, because we paid her a salary, of course. And we were looking to gather 250 students from the HBCUs and any college that had African American students in it, in the states whose zip code began with 2. And it was 6 of them. You know, the Carolinas, Virginia, Maryland, District of Columbia, and someplace else, West Virginia maybe, I don't know. But North Carolina had a surprising number of schools. I didn't realize they had so many schools. But we gathered all of that information. Back then it wasn't on a disc. It was in books published by the government. And Carolyn and I, we went through all of those, and we picked up enough information to send out about, I want to say it was 8,000 letters. But maybe it wasn't quite that many. But out of that 8,000, we got 160. That tells you how much work has to go into getting things done, which was good. And Harry Jenkins was the EEO officer at NASA headquarters, and we went up there, and that's really where we got 25 grand from. And we had 2 days of conference, and I thought Harry Jenkins would never stop grinning. Man, I mean, you know, it was like God sent us a gift. And from there, you know, that first one in 1980, we did one every year, and facilities and companies would ask us to bring the conference to their facility, like Goddard wanted one, NSA wanted one, and Los Alamos wanted one. I mean, we were taking these people, large, fair numbers of African American, and they would hire some of them right there on the spot. So it was very successful, and it's done even today. That was my big thing with NTA. The problem is I became president, I became executive director, and those jobs weren't, you know, I mean, they were difficult. It was, and NASA funded NTA, the national body, beginning back in the mid-70s, and went right on through. And so we did a lot of work with students, and when they were doing their research at Langley, we would, you know, if they were there doing the conference, we would have them present, and we covered just about every HBCU in those 6 states, you know. And we had guy in particular. He was he grew up in Newport News, and he became a PhD and wound up down in North Carolina State. But he'd bring his people, his kids up there. And then he went to Penn State. He'd bring those kids down, you know, and it was really a fun thing to do.
So if you had to look back over that journey from 1962 till you retired, and even now, as you reminisce and go back and look at that career, and look at the possibilities, or look at the privilege, the privilege to have had opportunity to do those things, and so many, you know, with the idea of Mary Jackson and Katherine Johnson and Vaughn, you know, the hidden figures idea. Yes, they did things that the world would be just amazed today, but there's so many others like yourself who have done things that were not necessarily, movies weren't made about what you did, but you touched so many lives of people, yes, but you touched the future, you touched the design of research and aviation and you know, atmospheric adventures. As you look back on that, what would be your comment about that opportunity to have had that journey and to still be able to, here you are today, and as we say as we get older, in our right minds. You can remember it, you can feel it, you can still see it. In my case, of some of the things, Gil, I think about airplanes, and I can smell it. I can smell it. You know what I'm saying? And so, as you look back over that journey, what would your comment be? What would your statement be about that?
Well, in a sense, I think it was probably the best job I could have gotten. And I learned, it's unbelievable, the amount that I learned from start to finish. And it was a good job. For example, somebody told the people up at General Motors that I might be a candidate for their research team. And I went up to General Motors and was interviewed, and the guy wanted to hire me, but he kept talking about, you got to run a plant to get ahead in General Motors. But he didn't say a whole lot about the research team. He just talked about, you got to run a plant. You got to be a plant manager. Well, needless to say, I didn't take that because I thought that I had the better job. And a couple of years later, General Motors started heading downward. So I probably would have been laid off. And there were other companies. I ran into a cousin of mine in Connecticut, said, man, you got to really like that. Look here, in 5 years, I don't want to see you down there. I want to see you up here. They made more money, a lot more money. My brother was a tool and die maker with an AFCO, and he probably made more money than I did. But no, and I found that most businesses, they didn't have the Microsofts and you know, the Dells and all of those folks back then. But I found that in the businesses, you had a certain number of products, and you got assigned to a product, and you could spend your whole life working that product. And I didn't NASA, there's so many things you could learn and do, and you know. So I probably would not have enjoyed anything but the money. And once I got to finish the education, which I dreamed about most of my young life, you know, it was do what was interesting.
Amen.
You know.
Amen to that. Yeah. As you talk about dream, I'll put this in later, but maybe I didn't talk about where you came from as a kid.
Huh. Well, I I was born in Chesapeake. At least that's where we were registered. It was called Norfolk County then, and we were all of us had 5 brothers, 4 brothers, 5 of us, no sisters, and we were registered, all registered in Virginia, but we lived in Moyock, North Carolina. That's where my paternal grandfather had his setup. He was a sharecropper, and he sharecropped for most of the farmers in northeast North Carolina. I mean, he was the workingest man I ever heard of. I didn't meet him because he was born the year he would die the year I was born. But in that farming, after the crash in 1929, farming went down, it went bust. And so my father and his brother, they were the 2 youngest of about 15 children that started being born in 1880. And my grandfather was born in 1857, so you know he was my grandfather, not great grandfather, my grandfather. My father wound up coming to Norfolk to work at the naval station, Norfolk Naval Station. That's what they call it then. And so he moved the family to Norfolk, and that's where I was raised. I was about, I don't know, 3 years old when we came to Norfolk, and went through school there. When I was 9, and my oldest brother was 10 or 11, my father died. So my mother wound up being a widow with 5 boys to raise. The youngest one was 3, the oldest one was about 11. And so, and back then, this was big time Jim Crow. Black women, they could only work in somebody's house. All my aunts, all my cousins, and everybody, they could only work in somebody's house, cleaning it up, watching the babies and that kind of stuff. Those were most of the kinds of jobs they had. And so my mother, and none of them had a whole lot of education, you know. My mother went to work in somebody's house, some young white lady's house. And she would get there 5 o'clock in the morning, leave her 5 boys in bed, and go to that white lady's house. Be there by 5 o'clock, and leave maybe at 4 or 5 o'clock, almost 12 hours. And one day she went there, and she was fixing herself a piece of toast, just a piece of toast, to have something to put in her stomach to get started with. The lady came in there and hit the ceiling. "I'm not paying you to eat my food." Well, my mother, she was just 5'2", but she full of fire, you know. She looked at that lady, put that toast on the counter, went and got her coat, and said, "I won't be back," you know. And she decided that she would never work in anybody's house. So she went to the fish house, you know, shell oysters, and that's where she stayed. Her goal was to get the youngest to the age of 18. He was 3 years old at the time. So she had 15 years to work like that, and she did it. She got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and she came home at 6:30 at night, and she made sure everybody had something to eat, and she went into her room, and she prayed. She prayed until she went to sleep. That's what she did. And she gave us instructions. She said, y'all better stay here in this house, and you know what you should do. And every Sunday, we dressed up in our 1 suit and went to church. She was very religious, and So we had to, you know, exist on not much. And when I was 11, my oldest brother was about 12, maybe 13. He came home one day, and this is 1948. 1948. He had $2 in his hand. Now, what kid in 1948 is going to wind up with $2 in his hand unless somebody gave it to him? But nobody gave him that. He caddied. He found the golf course. Golf course. We lived on the border of Norfolk with Princess Anne County, and this golf course is in Virginia Beach, Cavalier Yacht and Country Club. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Mm-hmm. We had to go from where Norfolk State is, around that area. That's where we live, to there. And at 11, 12, 13 years old. And the only way we could get there was from around. And these white guys would pick us up because we would be their caddies. So I begged my mother for the summer I was 11, all summer long, can I go and caddy? And every time I asked her, she said, no. You know, 11-year-old kid, no. But one time I asked her, she didn't say anything. And I figured I was either going to get smacked or you know, I didn't know, you know. But she didn't say no. So the next day I got up and went to the golf course. And I caddied for 4 years. 4 years. And every day what I make, I'd bring home and give it to her. I kept a quarter for the next day's lunch, a moon pie and a raw cola, you know. And I would make $4 to $8 a day, which was more than she made, you know. And I could do it all during the summer, and that helped. It helped a lot. My oldest brother gave her his, you know. So it we did our part to help it along. And as my younger brothers came along, they found jobs and they did the same thing. And so what that meant was that we really didn't have much of a childhood. You know, there was no music, no sports, nothing like that. After the golf course, my oldest brother found a job in a restaurant, and we started in the restaurant, and that's where I stayed until I quit and went to the military. So, you know, that was the childhood, you know. And all that time I was hankering to go to college, and I got married young, but I was still hankering to go to college. And I got married when I was in the Air Force. And when we got out, we made the decision. So we poor. You know, in the Air Force I was making $250 for everything a month. And we were poor. I said, but we may as well go to school being poor if we're going to be poor. So, and that's what we did. You know, the GI Bill, and my wife found a good job at that time for us. She ran a kitchen at a Howard Johnson restaurant, and she's an excellent cook. And that with the GI Bill money, we made it work. So that's why I almost hit the ceiling in February of 1962, because we made it.
Wow, that's a great story. I mean, that's when you said Norfolk County, I grew up in Norfolk County too.
Is that right?
I live in Hydros Ferry. That's over near Churchland, and that Churchland area. So I understand that. And also the farm thing. I was a farm kid. I grew up on a farm. I was the oldest of 6 kids, and so understand how the work thing. I missed a lot of my childhood in the summertime because a lot of kids, when school was out, they had opportunities to play ball and walk up down the street and play. I had to work. I had to do man work when I was a kid, and so I certainly do appreciate that part, and so really connect. But that's an interesting story, Gil. I mean, that piece really needs to be the preference for everything. I mean, that preference, what you said today with me, with that would certainly put context with everything else that you said, and so I really appreciate. I appreciate the opportunity. I don't know if there's anything else you want to share, but this has just been a great opportunity just to listen, just to listen to you.
Yeah. Well, it's I assign it to grace.
Yes.
I assign it to grace.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that I assign it to grace, of course, is that, of course, we're church people and we are followers of Jesus Christ. But when I was in high school, I went to Booker T, of course, and I just blew it. I blew that 4 years as bad as you could blow anything. And but when I went in the Air Force, I started taking courses at the United States Armed Forces Institute, USAFE. And I was doing math. In high school, I did algebra and geometry. Nothing else, just algebra and geometry. And a year of geometry and I think 2 years of algebra. No physics. Chemistry, I took the lowest level of chemistry. I think I took biology, I don't know. But when I went to Virginia State, I decided, I had my work in the Air Force was a radar operator. We were at the high end of technology for the mid-50s. And I decided I was going to take math, This is all I had was algebra and geometry. Went to register for math on campus, and the line was down the highway. I never seen so many people want to take math. So I didn't want to stand in that line, and the physics guy was sitting over there at the table like this with his legs crossed, waiting for somebody to come for him to register. And I went over and sat down and talked to him. And we decided to major in physics. And at Virginia State that year, 17 people decided to major in physics, all salutatorians, valedictorians from the counties and everywhere around. And got in there, and I didn't know what trigonometry was. Had no idea what it was. Calculus, never heard the word, and did not take a physics class in high school. And here I am going to jump on this college curriculum in physics. Well, it turned out good. All the math, all the physics courses, I never flunked a course. Made reasonable grades. I wasn't going to make 3.6s and 7s because I had lost too much in high school. But out of the 17 people that enrolled, I was the only one that graduated on time. And there were 2 of us to graduate, and my buddy, the one that graduated with me, had been there for 6 years. 6 years, I think it was there for 6 years. And so, with that poor background, it had to be grace. Had to be grace, man. So, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed all of my grace.
And so when you say that, Gil, I have to think about my life and my career, and I look back over, you know, talk about your riotous years in high school. I've had riotous years, certainly, and right on through my adult life. But I had to now come to the realization that as you talked about your mother, as she worked 12 hours a day or longer, came home and checked on her children, and she went into her prayer room, and she lifted her concerns before God. I don't know what my grandmother said. I don't know what my mother said. I have to believe that the blessings that I experienced in my life was because of their faith, because of what they did, because of their, you know, and so my life is only because of what they asked God for. I am an answer to prayer. And so in my you know, understanding of that today for my children and for circumstances and situations that I've encountered, yeah, if I have an opportunity to put my hands on a situation or point someone in a certain direction, I certainly will do it. But I know the essence and the foundation of everything that's going to happen that's good has to be through that same faith that allowed me to come to where I am. And so we as people of color have that as our foundation. It's built on that. It's built on that. And those of us in this generation, your generation and my generation, can look back at that and see it. But sometimes when I look at the generation today, the now generation, they have turned away from God in many instances. They've turned away from Him. And so my concern is that not that God has lost any of His power or His ability, but we've failed in our intercessory functions. We've not prayed. We're not praying like our parents prayed. We're not praying like our parents prayed. We've slacked off a little bit. Including me. My prayer life is certainly not like my mother's was or my grandmother's. And I don't know. I won't check yours. But you talked about, and I believe in my heart, your mother was sincere. She was sincere.
Absolutely.
And so I believe what's going to have to happen, even though we've got more opportunities for education, experience, exposure, we've seen a lot more. But the foundation hadn't changed. What's needed hasn't changed. We cannot turn away from God because the world has given us a couple of opportunities. He's recognized a few of us. A few of us that have excelled and reached a different plateau. We can't turn away from the fact that we still need God. He's the essence. He's the center of everything that I've ever. You talk about what I've enjoyed opportunities and privilege just as you have. But when I look back, I realize it's only because of the grace of God. Just as you mentioned, only because of His grace that I was able to do that. And I recognize Him every opportunity I have. I don't talk about all the great. Yes, I've had great experiences. I've seen things that the average person hadn't seen, done things the average person hadn't done. I don't need no accolades, or all I want to do is let somebody know, but God did this. He did it for me, He can do it for you.
That's right.
And so that's a message when I have a voice and opportunity to share. If I talk about something I've experienced, yeah, great experience, thankful for the experience, it was a great opportunity, but God is how I got there. My message to you, the message to anybody today, God's able. He's able. Yes, he can do great things.
Yes, he is.
But you need to recognize Him and just give Him the praise for what He's done. And so I'm just so thankful to hear you say that, to share about your life and to know that, you know, you came from roots or foundation. There was preference on the blessings of God.
That's right.
And even at this point, you say it's only because of His grace.
That's right.
Only because of His grace.
Absolutely.
And so that's a blessing. It's a blessing to hear that. It inspires me, and I know that will inspire others.
Yes.
Amen.
Yes. That's it. I tell you. That's it.
Well, it's just been a pleasure, man. I tell you, every time, the times that I've set, every time that we've come together as yourself and even as a group, just listening to where we've come from. Everybody's got a different story about where they came from, but somehow those stories all come together, they mesh, and you can see where the central, see that focus. And I believe it's in a lot of these success stories, if you want to call them success stories, or how we made it over stories.
Right.
Has to be based on that. And that's how we as a people, again, I talked about, starting about Mary Jackson and Katherine Johnson and Sister Vaughn, and but I know the foundation of Mary, know the foundation of Katherine, and Vaughn. I know what it is. It's based on faith.
That's right.
Faith. It's based on their faith. That their faith got them. They had opportunity, they had education. Yes, they did struggle to get education. But the drive, the motivation, the stimulus for that was their faith, believing God will get me there if I try. God will get me there if I just try. And so that's a message that every time I have an opportunity to talk to young people, my own and others, don't forget your roots. Don't forget where you came from. Don't forget the fact that somebody prayed for you.
That's right.
Somebody prayed for you. You might not have heard the words. They might not have told you, but believe it. Somebody did.
That's right.
Somebody did, and somebody is. And so that's just, I think that's a part of our culture, a part of our heritage that we cannot forget.
That's right.
We cannot forget it. We cannot keep pouring into it. We cannot continue to support it. Somebody did it for me. I got to do it for somebody else.
Right. Right.
I think that's so important.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, Gil. I really do appreciate this privilege and opportunity.
It's my pleasure.
This has been great, man.
To go back and talk about it.